A year ago, I interviewed at Netflix and absolutely embarrassed myself, which obviously led to a rejection. But a lot of you guys wanted to hear about that, so let's talk about it. Now, even though I didn't get the job, I hope my experience can teach you guys on what not to do. I learned a lot from it, and I performed better on my other interviews after that, and I hope it helps you guys out too. Now, the first thing you guys probably want to know is, how did someone like you even get to interview with Netflix? Well, the answer to that question is, I don't know.
What do you mean by that?
I honestly don't know how I got an interview. I think it was just all luck. Netflix is a big company, so they probably let a lot of people interview. But the way it started was like all jobs. I just applied online. I applied for the new grad position since I was in my last year of college at the time. I didn't have a referral in my application. I just filled it out and called it a day. And surprisingly, only one day passed and I get an email. Next steps with Netflix. What a fucking surprise. When I applied, I did it as a joke because in my mind, I was like, yeah, Netflix is gonna interview me. That's funny. You got the whole squad laughing. The company that only hired senior engineers at this point is gonna interview some average bozo like me. That's hilarious. Now, if you don't know how the software engineer interview process goes for a lot of companies, it usually goes like this. The first step is the initial application, so you just send your resume, blah, blah, blah. The second step is an online assessment, which is just a coding test on a platform similar to LeetCode. From then, if you do good on that, you move on to a phone screen, and this is usually a technical coding interview where you'll solve some question with an engineer at the company, and if you do good on the phone screen, you'll move on to what's called the on-site interview. This usually consists of multiple interviews, and it could be one or multiple coding interviews, a system design interview, and then a behavioral interview. And if you pass all of those, you get the job. Pretty easy, right?
No.
Now, before some of you guys freak out and are like, oh my god, how am I gonna get a job or an internship? The process seems so difficult. How am I gonna do this? Or the smart people that are like, well, not every company does it like this. Some of them have it really easy. Well, you're right. The interview process all depends on the company. Some companies have it easier. Some companies have it harder. It really just all depends. But the process for Netflix, at least for the new grad position, which I applied for, it went like this. The first step was the application, which I just did. The second step is an online assessment. The third step is a phone screen with a Netflix engineer. And then the last part is the on-site, which was 3 interviews. A coding interview, a system design interview, and then a behavior interview. The email I got was for the online assessment. And I think it was just an automatic response to weed out applicants before they actually check resumes. I had a few days to prepare before it expired, so I spent some time doing some LeetCode questions before attempting the assessment. The assessment was done on a platform called CodeSignal, and the questions were very similar to what you'd see on LeetCode. The coding assessment had 4 questions that felt like LeetCode easies and mediums. I only solved 3 of the questions. A question about matrices fucked me up, but I thought that was it because I've seen some posts online, Reddit posts where people literally get a perfect score and get rejected. So I was like, well, whatever. Wasn't expecting much anyways. Netflix would not want me. So a few weeks passed and I was just in bed scrolling on TikTok, being lazy, being a degenerate, and I get an email from a Netflix recruiter saying, hello from Netflix, next steps. I cannot believe the email. I was in complete shock and disbelief. Now at this point, in my opinion, I've officially moved on to the interview process because they've checked my resume, I've done the online assessment to weed out people when I passed, and now you guys are probably wondering, well, what did your resume look like to move on? Well, in my opinion, my resume wasn't that impressive. I had 2 small internships that weren't that impressive, at least to a big company like Netflix, and the personal projects I had at the time were very simple YouTube tutorial type of projects. All of them were web development projects. None of it was really unique. I didn't stand out too much. I think the projects I had were a social media clone, a blog website, and then a simple crypto website where I just fetched data from an API. I also didn't go to some fancy prestigious school like Harvard, MIT, or UCLA. I went to an average state school. Like when I applied to jobs and I had to enter my school, sometimes it wouldn't show up as an option and I had to select other. So yeah, I have no idea how I moved on. Now I was at the phone screen stage where I have to do an interview with a Netflix engineer. So I set up the time for the interview and started the LeetCode grind. I was on my fucking David Goggins type of grinding. I was eating LeetCode for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was fucking overdosing on LeetCode. LeetCode was running through my veins. I dreamed about LeetCode, had nightmares about LeetCode. It was serious. You could put me on a motivational video. Now I'm being dramatic here, but I think I did around 50 to 75 LeetCode problems from when I got the email to the day of the interview. I couldn't do much preparation because remember how I mentioned I had 2 small internships on my resume? Well, I was in the middle of that second internship, and I also had class, and at the time I was taking computer vision and machine learning, and if you've seen the math in those classes,
Ew, you're ugly.
Yeah, it's not something I could just skip on. I probably would have failed those classes if I didn't pay attention. But fast forward to the day of the interview. I was so fucking nervous. I didn't have much interview experience, and the thought of interviewing with a company like Netflix made it 100 times worse. I was sweating, couldn't focus. It was just bad, man. But the interview got started. The interview was done online, so I was in a Zoom call with an engineer, and we used CodeSignal as the platform to write my code. The interview started by introducing ourselves, asked me about my experience, my projects, and all that. And I think I was fumbling my words a bit too since I was so nervous. But after that, they asked the coding question. The question was something you'd expect from LeetCode, and the most surprising thing about the question was that it was similar to one I've done on LeetCode. So in my head, I was just like, thank fucking God, I won't embarrass myself at least. So I started off by explaining what I thought the problem was asking. The interviewer agreed and said I was on the right track. Cool. Then I started to explain my approach for the problem, and the interviewer was once again agreeing with me, confirming that I was on the right track, and I was treating it like a pair programming session since that's what they said. But I think it's bullshit for some companies, because some of these interviews, I swear they just want you to solve the problem. Anyways, I explained my approach, and now it was time to code it up. Now here's where the problem start, and my nerves completely took over. You ever had that moment in school when you're doing an exam or a quiz, and once it starts, you just forget literally everything you learned? Yeah, that happened to me during this interview. Now, even though I explained my approach, asked some questions, I just completely forgot how to code. The nerves won. My solution started with a hash map, and I chose Python as my language for the interview because I'm a soy dev and I want it really easy. And in order to make a hash map in Python, you tend to use a dictionary or a dic. The problem was I forgot how to use a dictionary, so I basically forgot how to use my dic. It happens to every developer's life where you just forget how to use your dic. Very unfortunate. So I ended up stumbling on the most basic things with a dictionary. And look at it from the interviewer's point of view, right? The person you're interviewing is someone who's done a few years of coding classes, since it's a new grad position, right? They've passed the online assessment, their resume was good enough to make it here, but you're telling me they can't do a simple for loop. How the f did they get here? Now, unfortunately, I spent all my time stumbling on the solution, and then the interview ended just like that. I just knew that was it. It was just embarrassing, man. And the interviewer was nice and was just like, it's all right, man. Don't worry about it. It happens to a lot of people. And that was it. The worst part about it was that literally the moment the interview ended, I decided to finish implementing my solution with the same test case that I was given. And I kid you not, in about 5 minutes, I coded it up without any issues. It's like all the knowledge came seeping into my head, and I was so mad. Now, a few days passed, and I was just disappointed with myself. Like, how could I mess up the easiest interview I probably could have ever gotten for Netflix? I solved a similar question, my approach was correct. How could I just forget how to code? But I get an email from the Netflix recruiter, and the email says, congratulations, you're moving on to the next steps. And I was so fucking excited. I was so happy. It was crazy, man. Nah, I'm just kidding. I just got a rejection letter, obviously. You thought it was going to be a happy ending. I'm not the main character here. I was just a side character who finally died for the plot. And even if I did move on, I would have had to do a system design interview. And if I did that interview, I probably would have gotten banned from ever applying to Netflix again. I never studied anything about system design, so I had no idea what to do there. So I probably got saved from embarrassing myself even more. Now, while in the interview guide I got from Netflix, they said they care about your problem solving, but at the end of the day, it's a coding test. If you can't code it, why should you pass? Now, after this interview, even though it was a fail, I definitely learned a lot. I learned how to control my nerves better, made sure I knew my coding fundamentals, and improved how I managed my time during the interview. So here's my advice for you guys so that it doesn't happen to you too. Don't let your nerves take over. I know it's really hard, but really try your best. Don't spend a majority of your time just talking about the solution. They're here to see you code. Now, it's perfectly fine to talk while you're coding since it helps the interviewers see your approach while you're writing the code, but don't just talk and don't just code. Try to do both of them. My next piece of advice is try to get a solution. It doesn't have to be optimal, just try to get some type of solution. And my last piece of advice, of course, don't forget how to use your dick. It's just embarrassing.